Welcome, everybody. Great to be here. I'm Naomi, and I'm the moderator for today to speak about DeFi versus CeFi. And well, we're just going to kick it off with a quick round of introductions. So yeah, Philip, if you could go first.
Sure. My name is Philipp Pieper. I'm the co-founder of Swarm. Been around in DeFi in crypto since 2017. Before then, actually was serial entrepreneur, built a data vendor, did leverage buyouts of different companies. But in my former life was actually working for Deutsche Bank, doing private equity and for Allianz Group. So coming into the space, actually a lot of like financial experience. I never thought that would really come down the pike that it did. And with Swarm, we started off actually the first couple of years doing a DAO on security tokens. We're then actually noticing that actually so the liquidity was really missing for that kind of category. And then we're looking globally to different jurisdictions where to best, found a sort of financial institution to get the job done. And we found that in Germany, of all places, and built a financial institution that we're now sort of under regulation by BaFin, which is a local jurisdiction, and are building basically licensed DeFi constructs.
Yeah, very interesting. So you're a great person to speak about DeFi and CeFi. And yeah, how about you, Brian?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's Brian here. I am the co-founder and co-project lead of zkLend. A little bit about my background. Before starting zkLend, I worked in the financial industry for about 15 years. Started off doing investment banking, covering public and private financing, which means bond issuance, private debts, IPO, and acquisition as well, acquisition financing. And did that for about 6 years before moving on to the buy side with private equity fund. I'm sorry. So I've been on both sides of the lending table, both as a lender for the bank and then borrower with the private equity funds, and firsthand see some of the pinpoints and some of the frustration for institutions getting financing as well as individuals as well, and start to see a institutional drift towards DeFi towards Web3 and DeFi around 2018, with a lot of news coming up, and take it as a hint that I should attach myself professionally in the field. And with zkLend, what we are building it's essentially a money market protocol, a lending borrowing platform building on Ethereum layer 2, and we're currently building on StartNet. And for us, we have two key theses. One is we believe in Ethereum long term, and layer 2 scaling, it's the ultimate solution that we feel is going to be the direction to go in the next decades for the build out of Ethereum. And for 2, it's we feel that institutional is coming on. So for our protocol, we actually have 2 arms. One it's for the DeFi retail users to borrow and lend over collateralized manner, and for institution, it's to do a permissioned manner and could be assessed through both under collateralized and unsecured. With that, I will pass the mic back to Naomi. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And moving on to Mr. Ten, who has the most appropriate profile picture, I think, for the Decentral branding.
Thank you, Naomi. Everybody, well, first, thank you guys for having me on this panel. I'm Mr. Ten, one of the co-founders for Ten Finance. We are a yield optimizer on Binance. Currently, I'm moving across chain to several other chains. I come from the traditional finance side, similar to Philip and Brian here. Started off as a research analyst for a family office, moving on to portfolio management. Did that for about 10 years. Set up my own fund, trading primarily FX equities, indices, and commodities. Fell down the rabbit hole of crypto, similar to everybody else around 2015. Missed out on the Ethereum ICO. I think we discussed this prior to our call, simply because I didn't have a crypto wallet with Bitcoin in it. But been full-time in crypto since then. Went down another rabbit hole of DeFi summer, and we came with Ten Finance, and we're slowly expanding using this market to build for the future. So thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, exciting time. So let's get into it. CeFi, DeFi. What do you think are, like, maybe every one of you could share one of the most attractive or biggest features that you think? So let's start with CeFi. CeFi has. Yeah, Brian, what's your take? What do you think is like the
Sure.
most attractive feature of CeFi?
Most attractive aspect of CeFi, I would say it's actually the somewhat disagree with me, but I would say the actual onboarding process and also the actual compliance layering of it, because I feel that a lot of individuals using a DeFi protocol, a lot of them are not crypto native to begin with, and for them to actually coming on from a TriFi space, having the experience of having a teller or having someone to actually be on the other side and being able to assist you throughout the way instead of yourself reading or watching YouTube video and learning how to open an account in MetaMask or a Ledger, for example. This is actually quite a new experience for them. So I would say CeFi is actually doing a very good hand-holding process for onboarding and being able to bring the in-touch experience for individual to come onto the Web3 and the DeFi space.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, Mr. Tan?
I have to agree with
the
Brian.
Most DeFi native.
So, the onboarding process is definitely key. And I think user experience and user interface is definitely the key aspect of CeFi onboarding, the user base. Because when we think about crypto users or crypto natives, a lot of them have experience with, say, centralized exchanges or centralized finance platforms, such as the ones mentioned, Celsius and everybody else that kind of went by the wayside. And I think the UI UX experience and the onboarding process is the key to adoption and making it easier, and the lack of responsibility of owning your keys and self-custodying your own, wallet onto a DeFi protocol. Even for a crypto native, it is a strenuous task, sometimes scary, to get onto DeFi and to get used to utilizing your, self-hosted wallets and connecting to a DeFi protocol. And then there's another, big risk, but I think definitely UI UX is the key to, and the lack of responsibility that people have in saying, okay, Mr. XYZ, you can manage my tokens. I'll just click a couple buttons and open up the app and go on to it. So, until DeFi, which I think everybody is in the space trying to, is create a better user experience. And until we do that, DeFi is going to lag in terms of adoption compared to CeFi type apps.
Yeah, I think, the self-sovereignty or the self-custody aspect is definitely a big one. Any thoughts on that, Philipp, on what Mr. Tan just shared?
Well, both Brian and Mr. Tan, I think, generally I agree with everything that they said. I think, though, that, you can always preface anything that we now ask about CeFi or DeFi is maybe sort of if done right. Meaning that, there's obviously CeFi players that are doing it not appropriately. And, obviously the financial system has been built on sort of centralized financial infrastructure. And I think, there's good reason why regulation is then in place to actually sort of keep people in check, to actually sort of have oversight over behavior, unbiased infrastructure, making sure that the promises made to customers and consumers about the products is actually holding up. Meaning that sort of if that is all, according to plan, then actually all the features that were mentioned actually hold true, which means that you have a much better, centralized onboarding experience. You actually have a faster execution because you can do things off chain. You don't have to wait for things to actually execute and settle off chain, on chain. You actually have the ability to recover things and recover accounts if you need to. So the support aspect plays a big role. And, if we really think through the next phases of the market, well, we need to acquire a lot of customers that actually are not, crypto natives. They're not really they don't really know what a private key necessarily is or a wallet is, and have somewhat, rightly so, sort of certain fears about it too. So CeFi, and that's been sort of spoken about for years now, CeFi has a superior way of actually dealing with that. And possibly even, I think, one other aspect that sort of has not been mentioned yet is to actually integrate into other financial market infrastructure too, which means, we will come to a market where there's going to be real world assets of different kinds that are coming to the market. And the bridges to a financial market infrastructure requires a CeFi kind of construct, because that's the only thing that, or not the only thing, but it's predominantly the sort of interface that financial market infrastructure knows to deal with.
Yeah. So with that in mind, what would you say could convince somebody to still explore DeFi without using any of those centralized vendors like the centralized exchanges or the Celsiuses or Nexos of this world? Philipp, since you were just at it.
I think all the features that we know DeFi really is known for, it's, and these are scary words, right? So things that, around non-custodial, meaning sort of that you make your own decisions about what happens with your assets and basically have your responsibility over those actions. I think somewhat misunderstood in that context is often that non-custodial means MetaMask. Well, non-custodial means that I, as the consumer, I can make choices who can actually maybe even service me, which means that I can deal with a professional custody layer that then deals with a liquidity protocol, but it's my choice which tools to use. It's my choice to actually move that from one to the other, and I'm not bound by an integration of, custodial wallet with a protocol, but I can make those choices on my own. The second is obviously that it's on chain, that it's settled on chain. So DeFi really then, leads to that transparency that we think is really, not just code is law, but it's basically giving everyone the comfort to say, well, before I execute something, theoretically, I can read the code and I can understand what actually happens in the very instance that I'm taking action on it. So I think the latest couple of months have brought that out a lot to say, well, if certain CeFi players make it easy for me to onboard, but they actually embezzle funds and misappropriate how they promise to actually deal with it for me, and maybe they said that in the terms of use very clearly, but in the end I didn't understand it. Well, then I think people are being sort of pushed a lot more into the DeFi realm, understanding that the safeguarding and the decision making in your control means a lot more. So I think the features of DeFi have just been underlined a tremendous amount versus maybe the group of people that have been in DeFi already for the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm. So how realistic do you think it is to require everybody to self-custody their coins in the future? Brian?
Sure. I think, I would say it's definitely possible. And what it really entails is a better infrastructure. For instance, like what Philipp was mentioning about the onboarding process. Yes, it's I would say it's human nature for at least for people to want to trust people and then have the interaction and be then rather to move on to trust technology. I mean, for the first instance, but I think the education and also the technology infrastructure that's enabling it to make it an easy process and also making it a more fun process and more intuitive process is definitely something that we are seeing a lot of improvement overall. For example, taking MetaMask, for example, let's say a wallet that's still using a seed phrase. And what we see is a lot of different wallets are coming out in terms of, for example, Argent come out with Argent and Argent X, which actually uses a social guardian in terms of you can use either a friend, you can use a code, or you can use Argent itself to basically verify the code instead of having a piece of paper write down the 12 seed phrases and tuck it underneath your bed kind of scheme. So I think all these are actually taking some of the fear and taking some of the putting some of the intuition back to how people interact with the DeFi space, I think this is basically one of the first steps that needs to get done. And I see that, I mean, we're bridging the gap in that sense. And happy to talk a little bit more onto this one, but I think I'm happy to, I mean, I would love to hear Mr. Tan and also Philip on this point before jumping on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Mr. Tan, any words you'd like to add?
Definitely, I think UI, and I keep coming back to this, right? UI, UX, and a prime example could be, and I'm sure Brian can attest to this from his days in his previous career, is options trading and what Robinhood did to the retail space with regards to allowing anybody to become an options trader. I traded options before about 20 years ago, but my platform was quite confusing to the retail novice trader, whereas what Robinhood did was transform everybody into a options trader. And I think DeFi needs to go that route, self-custody, and I think not only just DeFi, but maybe banking overall. I think how we've seen maybe in our time, and I mean, we're not all that old, but what we've been conditioned to understand as banking is going to change how my kids are going to be in their 20s and 30s utilizing bank accounts and having control of their own self-custody wallets. And obviously we're still fairly new. I think MetaMask usage only increased over the last 3 years, and the same thing goes for all these other new wallets that are coming out, which is obviously a part of this evolution that we're going through. I think over the next couple of years, we're going to be seeing a lot of new changes and a lot more emphasis put on education of DeFi protocols. Lending in DeFi is, I can guarantee you, 90% of people that are in DeFi don't even truly understand how to utilize it. Same thing with utilizing, a yield optimizer like us. So it's all about education, creating a UI and a UX for the users to be able to easily get on there. Because think about the difference between a DeFi experience and a CeFi experience, right? Maybe the next thing is going to be CDeFi. But centralized finance, you just literally open the app, couple clicks, and you're done, and you can exit the app. Mm-hmm. But in DeFi, you need to go onto the protocol, connect your wallet, approve the transactions. So it's those extra steps, and it's human nature. If something takes a little too long, we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to look into it unless you're truly interested in it and you see the benefits of that. But I think, over the next couple of years, we're going to see tremendous evolution and incredible innovation in this space. And I come from traditional finance, and what brought me to DeFi is that anybody, anywhere can literally have access to it. Not just accredited investors or ECPs that have access to institutional products.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
I'm going to add one thing on top of it. I think we in the industry, we tend to sort of always speak in extremes. So either it's CeFi or it's DeFi, or either it's you're self-custodial or non-custodial, or it's a custodial wallet. And I think we have to start to understand a little more these shades of gray, where basically there's a scale between one and the other extreme, and you as an individual can make choices actually which direction you want to go and what's appropriate for you too, right? So I think there's entirely new service layers that have to be thought through and built that, for example, take care of the simple, how do I make sure that if I am run over by a bus, that all my crypto assets don't actually fall by the wayside and my family still has something to live off of, right? So, and that's doesn't mean that suddenly someone has access to my keys to then actually execute the same kind of trades that I'm doing. But it's something in between where there's some safeguarding process that either happens through social, which Brian was mentioned, or it happens by involving players that are either regulated or that have a special situation to not actually be able to give up your keys to law enforcement, but that really need something that is really battle proven. And still, these players have to be obviously building it in the most trustless way and fashion. So I don't think we have all the answers yet, but I think basically sort of this phase in the market is actually pushing a lot of attention to not just building a pleasurable and nice and easy to use onboarding experience, but actually to take care of the fundamental infrastructures of how to make this a mass consumer market, because we need to cross the chasm. Without crossing the chasm, this whole market is not really going to work out, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think it's definitely interesting that we're now trying to tap into the existing trust networks, you could say, that we have in our social circles, where we say, okay, you know what, I'm going to use Shamir secret sharing to give a part of my key to my friend, part to my lawyer maybe, and part to my family, so I can always recover it without having to trust one single person. But yeah, talking about crossing the chasm, what do you think has to happen to do that, to get DeFi beyond UI, UX? What do you think? Maybe regulation? Maybe, I don't know, maybe we haven't found a killer app yet to convince people to get in. What's your take on that? Maybe Mr. Tan, let's start with you.
Obviously DeFi in its present sense, and I feel like what we all encountered with DeFi is going to be completely different during this next round that whenever it comes, and a lot of innovation is happening. But and I'm all for UI UX, and obviously regulation is key. But I feel like we're far away from that. I can't speak for any particular country, but everybody wants to regulate, but who's protecting who? And I always kind of go back to this comparison I make when they'll let anybody walk into a casino even if they have $5 in their account, but they won't let somebody invest into a DeFi protocol because they're not an accredited investor because of where they live. So I think there needs to be some sort of a true form of regulation that allows anybody to partake. If it's my money, I want to risk it on whatever I want, place it wherever I want, whether it's a centralized financial protocol or DeFi protocol or whatever it may be. But I just feel like we're far from coming to that sense of having equal parts. I know Buffin's done a lot of great things. I know the US is trying to pass certain laws, and some countries have, accepted Bitcoin as a native currency. But what about the whole entire Web3 ecosystem, right? Because it's more than just crypto. The narrative changes even from Bitcoin, from what it was meant to be to what it's considered now, is drastically changed over the last 12 years or so. So I don't know. I wish I knew the answer. But the thing is, I know there's a lot of bad actors in every space. It's not just crypto. I mean, there's probably 1,000 times more bad actors in traditional finance than there is in crypto. It's just that the space is so small and everything is so magnified and under the microscope, where centralized financial institutions are afraid of, let's say, decentralized finance as a whole, because they have no control over it. And, that's a different topic, but I think I'll let Philipp or Brian take the lead on this one.
Yeah, Philipp, since you've also been around in TradFi and CeFi, any thoughts?
Well, so you're asking about where the market is headed, and
yeah,
like I've been working on this conviction for a number of years, so it's not going to be a surprise. But I think that it's kind of interesting to see the last 1.5 years that DeFi has really taken shapes and forms, has been battle proven, tested on a daily basis with the protocols that have been evolving, these in different variations of liquidity protocol. So it's actually a test bed to now apply it to standard financial products. And I think there's good reason to do that, right? Because you actually, we talked about some of the benefits. Yeah, you don't really have like intermediaries. They take also a huge chunk of the margin out of a trade. You don't necessarily have the same kind of market making that exists in the traditional world, where you always have the bifurcation of the experts that do something for you as market makers, and then you have the asset holders and investors on the other side. But finally, we are coming to an infrastructure where that all is also accessible, exploitable, shareable, and still can be within the realm of regulated activity. So the next phase is going to, in my mind, and tangibly, I know that these steps will occur. It will actually bring new additive things to the space, meaning that we're not trying to then build the next lending protocol for crypto assets, but it's going to be lending and issuance and trading for real world assets. With that, we're going to see a tremendous amount of new use cases, but also stability come into the space, which might seem boring for some crypto aficionados, but on the other hand, it's something that is extremely exciting when you look at it from the traditional financial world. So while we're trying to make all this access simpler and obviously bring this into the fold of how, and still this is a challenge. I mean, I know firsthand that there's a lot of head scratching on their other end from the regulators. And when you tell them that, you want to do a self-custody regulated DeFi protocol, and there's so many edge cases that still have like foundational components that you can't put into a traditional financial box, but still we're getting there. I think the convergence is happening pretty fast. It's been actually, happening for the past 12 to 18 months quite significantly. So I think there's a Cambrian moment where a lot of the things are being figured out right now. And it's going to be quite exciting outside of any kind of bear market prediction. It's going to be very exciting to see what the next 12 to 18 months hold, because finally these are coming to fruition. Finally, there's a way to actually now bring them into scale and not just, theoretically talk about them.
Yeah, just to echo, Mr. Tan and Philipp's point, I think all great points mentioned already. And for me, I think going down the road, basically, I don't think CeFi is going to be completely replacing. I mean, DeFi is going to be completely replacing CeFi. It's going to be a hybrid model where they will coexist together. And that's for two reasons. One, it's you will always have users that actually prefer CeFi approach, where they actually do want to have someone manage their fund more passively and being able to utilize on people expertise and economical scale of doing it. And you do have bunch that actually want the autonomy, want the decentralization aspect of choosing your own tools to use and own protocol to approach and understanding the fundamentals behind it. But I think on the second hand, it's exactly what Philipp says, because DeFi is still at this point quite detached from a lot of the real assets component of things. In terms of, for example, when we do actual trading in terms of, let's say, trading goods, let's say, there are a bunch of applications you can use for decentralized financing and blockchains, which right now it's still detached at the moment. And I think CeFi is the piece that actually helps to bridge it. And so I do think there is a good coexistence between the two. And to put it in lack of a better word, the boring is actually what actually keeps the DeFi growing into a more exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great sentence. We should all remember that. And I mean, we're already seeing it. MakerDAO, I think they've been issuing loans against real world collateral. So I think that's just going to grow. And we're also at the end of this panel. But before we finish, I'd like to have each of you share maybe some advice for people who are looking to get into the space now, whether that is in terms of investing or in terms of working there. Yeah, let's start with you, Brian.
Sure. I'll start from a builder's point of view. For builder, I think look for projects that have, if you were to join projects with good fundamentals, good founding teams, and they are on set to solve a very unique pain point and unique problems in the ecosystem space. There are many problems to solve. All the naysayers are saying that crypto is not working. I mean, yes, it might have its deficiency, but that is for you to solve it. And so I think there are a lot of ways to contribute to the community. And two, it's to actually explore the ecosystem and find a point where you feel a very strong conviction and belief. And I think this shows through in terms of your approach with investor, your approach with users. And actually, it's I think the point that will actually make you stand out in a down market.
Okay, and how can people follow you if they want you?
Sure. My Twitter account is at BFU_FUPRIAN. So it's a little of a handful. Yeah.
I'm sure the Decentral team can share it later as well. All right, moving on to you, Mr. Ten. What's your advice?
I'd say my advice is to educate yourself with regards to the entire crypto ecosystem, and that comes from even just personal experience. When people find out I'm in the space, they ask me, what coin should I buy? Crypto isn't necessarily just coins, it's the entire ecosystem and everything that we're building here. DeFi protocols, CeDeFi, I think that's going to be a part of what Brian touched on as well, centralized financing to that. But I just think education, familiarize yourself with what's out there, because this space is not going away. It's only going to evolve. We're literally still at the ground floor of everything that's happening. DeFi is going to evolve in many different ways. We're literally just 2 years into DeFi compared to 12 in crypto, counting Bitcoin or whatnot. So just educate yourself with regards to different projects, what's happening, the technology that's coming out, and just be open to it, and just dive in and learn.
Yeah, I second that. And how do people follow you?
Well, I have a Twitter account, 0xMr10, but I'm quite boring. So it's at 10 Finance.
Boring is the new exciting.
You know what? I enjoy it, and I'm pretty sure Philip and Brian can relate to this. Is we're all long term, long horizon operators here. Coming from our backgrounds, I can tell that. And, I always tell everybody is, zoom out, take a step back, clear the noise, because the market noise you hear right now is just, it's going to confuse everybody. So when you take a couple of steps back, it's good. So at 10 Finance, you can learn more about us and what we're doing. And I appreciate you guys having me here.
Right. Awesome. And last but definitely not least, Philipp.
I'm going to underscore something that Mr. Ten just referred to. I think, I'm going to quote a friend who basically said, forget the price, remember the revolution. And, it's basically, there was this meme that I came across. Basically, there was I give you the tools to end climate change, poverty, and corruption. And then the response is always when moon and when token. And I think I think we have to get, if you're interested in the space, get that out of your head, because I've been through 2 bear cycles already, and with friends asking me, well, you're still in crypto, why are you still hanging around? Because it doesn't have any future. And the reality is that, number one, it takes longer to build these things. So we're working on really complex, not just technology stuff, but process stuff and regulatory stuff, and things that if you have a passion for any layer, any vertical, any industry, you can do incredibly revolutionary things. And starts with DAOs, it can go to certificates being sort of traded as NFTs and suddenly financialize everything, or it can go to financial markets. It doesn't really have to be financial markets the way that we've been talking about it now. And then also, we just have to realize we're very early on the adoption curve. If you think about the number of users that are really in crypto, I think it's comparable to the internet in 1990. So what happened after 1990? There was a huge blowout, right? And a incredible adoption. And I think, again, it's not going to come easy, but if you have talent and you actually have the passion for the topic, there's enough to do, and there's enough projects that will continue rewarding you for doing that. So don't be shy, show up and say, I'm here, I'm interested. And there's enough people in this space still that will point you in the positive direction where to go to.
Yeah, join the revolution. And where can they follow you if they want to hear from you?
So on Swarm Markets is the sort of project handle, but also Philipp Pieper is direct handle on Twitter. So easy to find.
All right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. It was a great hearing everybody's insights and thoughts on DeFi versus CeFi. And thanks for the Dcentral team for hosting us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.